that's no good. That one's pretty much got 0. But this isn't going to come off without this coming off, and I don't think this is going to come off without the hood coming off. I'm not getting into all that today. I'm going to take the battery back off, go put it on charger. We're going to put the plugs back on. I'll leave the wires off for now. I'm just going to throw the plugs in it, and we'll continue this another day. Well, I couldn't leave it alone. And this rubber hose that connects the valve cover to the breather there, man, was that a pain to get off. It was like rock hard. Should just cut the thing off, ended up tearing it up anyway. But see if y'all can see an issue here. See it? How about now? Intake number 1. So I think what we're going to do here is I need to get this push rod off. We're going to have to loosen off this rocker adjustment, and then try to see if we can rotate the rocker up so we can tap on into the valve with the rubber mallet. We're going to go ahead and spray that down. It looks like the other ones are okay. I mean, none of the other ones are popped off like that one. They're all connected. So doesn't mean they're not sticking. I guess we could. Thing needs an oil change anyway. There. So I'm gonna loosen this off so I can get I need to get the push rod out to make sure it's not bent, and then we're gonna rotate the rocker arm up and then tap on the valve. Surprisingly, the push rod is not bent. So what I did is I had loosened it off on a little bit where I could shove the rocker arm over, and I could pull the push rod out. You know, you can slide these things over, and then you know, swiveled it up and tapped on it. Got a brass punch and tapped on it and got it down. Now I need to get a pry bar and try to get it back up, and it's going to be a battle of down, pry it back up, down, up, down, up, down, up, until we get it moving freely. All right, hammering it down, and then get my pry bar on there. I'll show you. Once it's stuck down, pry bar to pull it back up. It's up right now, and it's springing back. Not perfect. I'm going to work on it some more. Just beating on it. Rubber mallet and spraying it with WD-40. It's getting there. All right, so number 1, stuck intake valve. Number 3, y'all haven't seen this yet, but I'm pretty sure the electrode on the plug was pretty oily. I'm pretty sure number 3 plug. Number 1 and 2 look good. I'm pretty sure number 1 and 2 have been changed, and number 3 has probably been a long time since that spark plug has been changed. So we're gonna hook the battery up, turn the key on, choke it. I've got just a little bit of gas in here, not much, but it should be enough to see if it'll fire up. Safe, then let's see if it'll fire up. fired up. Why did it quit? It could be getting fuel. Getting too much fuel? We're just kind of flooding out. Cut the fuel off. Why does it not want to run? Well, I pulled the little puffing out of the intake. I was worried the intake, that number one intake valve stuck again. You can sit down here and talk to you all for a second. I was worried that number one intake valve stuck again, and when it stuck, you know, it popped the push rod off. So I checked it. It's got 80 pounds of compression. It's not ideal, but it should be enough for it to run. I would like to see 120 across the board. I don't know what the specs are on this engine. 90 would be okay. 80 to me seems a little low, but like I said, it should run on that. To be honest, this thing is driving me crazy. We've got spark. I've checked it at the coil using the coil's ground, or the coil's positive lead, and the coil's ground lug to check it, and it's getting a signal. I've checked it at the plug wires. It's sparking. It looks like a good spark. We've done a compression test. I don't know if we should go back through and do all three. I don't remember what number one or number two and number three were. Like I said, number three or number one, I didn't do. I think one of them was like 105 and the other one may have been 95 or something like that. And then we know number one is at 80 right now. Like I said, that would, once this thing's running for a while, it would probably come up. To be honest, I feel like we've got some kind of an issue with the carburetor. I keep coming back. If you watch the video on the carb rebuild, I keep coming back to that tube that looks like it was down in the that housing, and wondering if that tube is not supposed to be in there. It just does crazy things. You know, this thing will be trying to run, and then it just starts pouring gas out, like it just floods it instantly. I don't know why it's doing that. That to me is kind of crazy. And it still does it even if you cut the fuel off. So we can turn our tank like this. We've got no fuel. Well, we've got a little bit in the line, but it's not like it's not sitting here flooding out. It's like when it's trying to draw fuel up, it just, instead of drawing a nice mist of fuel, it's just ugh, fuel everywhere. I've heard that these are very temperamental carburetors. I'm tempted to get another carburetor. I can get a carburetor for like $96, aftermarket carburetor. I'm tempted to do that on here. I normally would not do that, but I feel like it runs on brake clean. This carburetor inside is spotless. The jets are clear. I mean, everything is perfect on it. I put a kit in it. The float seals off. I mean, we went through this thing. We can go through it again. I'm not opposed to doing that again. I just feel like there's something, either we're missing something or there's something wrong with that carburetor internal, either in that body where that tube is. There could be something in there plugged up that we can't get to, or that tube may be supposed to be in the body of the carburetor, not in that body that bolts up in the float bowl. That I don't know. I've never had one of these things apart. I'm curious if the aftermarket carbs are the same style. I'm also curious, I think like a Ford 2000 would have had a Zenith, Ford 2000 gas tractor, would have had a Zenith carburetor, which to me is a much better carburetor than the Holley here. The Holley is supposed to be a little more fuel efficient. Do we really care that much about it in the tractor? Not really. So I would look and see if the Zenith carburetor has the same hookups for throttle and choke. If it does, we might order an aftermarket carburetor for a Ford 2000 and get a Zenith style carburetor and get away from this finicky Holley one. That, you know, we would just have to see if we can do that. I haven't looked that up or anything. It's really odd, and it's really odd that it just all of a sudden quit running. You know, it's like you cut the ignition off, but we checked it, we've got spark. So, what's going on here? What's going on is we've got a really frustrating tractor. You know, this is the kind of thing that, you know, you work on, and then you're like, hey, I got a free tractor, you want to come get it? Which is probably how I got it. But you know, it's very possible. You know, we've got maybe another intake valve sticking. We could do another compression test on it and see, you know, as gummy as that tank is, the intake guides could just be so varnished and gummed up. That brake clean that we're feeding it though, it won't lubricate it, but it should break up that gum stuff, which could cause it to stick if that stuff was solid and then we start spraying it and start gumming it up. So we'll let it sit like that and see if it sits in there. It might help loosen that stuff up. We really should probably mix up some two-stroke gas and put in here, since we did have that intake sticking, and just get those valve guides kind of lubed up. We did spray the top side of them with WD-40 on all valves, but I don't know how much of that got past the valve seals. So, yeah, that's where we are. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to do some research, see what I can figure out on a carburetor. If I can put a Zenith style aftermarket carburetor on here without, you know, changing up any of the linkage or anything, and, you know, to bolt right up and into the air cleaner and all that stuff bolt right up, I'm probably going to do that. There's something wrong with this carburetor. That may not be our only issue here, but there is something not right with this carburetor. And I don't think tearing into it again is going to help us. I think it's in that body where that tube is. There's something not right there. Now we could take that off and we could let that thing soak in some carb cleaner, you know, 24 hours and see if that would help things. But it just doesn't, you know, if it was an issue with it delivering fuel, you know, something was plugged up, we wouldn't get that flooding out, gas pouring out of the carburetor that we're getting. But this thing, it will be completely dry. It starts trying to start, and as soon as you kind of let off of it, or as you're cranking it, the thing just starts flooding with fuel out. And you can have the gas cut off, and like I said, I tested the needle and seat, they were sealing. So it's like it's flooding out from not an overfilled fuel bowl, but it's drawing too much fuel out of the fuel bowl for some reason. We could adjust the mixture screws, but it shouldn't be that far out that it's causing it to do that. So, yeah. I'm going to have to think on this, and then I'll bring y'all back when I come up with something on it. So I did some research, and what I came up with was this. Now what this is a clone of a Zenith that came on like it's something in the 3000 series. And the reason I got it is because it was the cheapest thing I could find. Like a older 2000 Zenith carburetor was like a couple $100. And you know, so I just kept looking, trying to find carburetors, and I came up with this one. This one was $80, or right around $80. I don't remember if it was 80. It might have been 84 or 7. I really think it was 79. It was like right around $80. And to be honest, I'm really impressed with the quality of it. The casting on it is really good. Like I really expected a rough casting. Came with gaskets, filter, and studs. So to be honest, I'm really impressed with it. We're gonna have to do some changing around. I think we'll have to take this fitting off, probably swap it with maybe the fitting that's on this carburetor. That may be the only changes we have to do. I'm not sure, but I think we'll get this thing on there, and I really feel like it's gonna run. I think we've been fighting with this carburetor, so let's get this thing off and we'll get that one on. I'll show you anything I have to change out to make this one work. All right, new carburetor's on. Everything fit. Like I said, I just had to switch the fuel fitting off of this one onto that one and move it to a different spot. This one's got 3 spots for fuel inlet, so I just swapped it around. I did end up running a tap through them just because they didn't feel great going in. It may have been 1/8" straight thread, not pipe thread. But anyway, we are good to try to start it. I've added some more fuel to our little temporary tank here. We should have fuel in the carburetor. I'll hook up the ignition and see if this thing will crank. Neutral. Key is on. I don't know if we'll need choke. We'll see without. All right, let's choke it. I think I flooded it. Flooded it out. Let it sit for a minute. These plugs have probably been flooded so many times now. That other carburetor that may not be firing that great. We may have to pull them out and clean them. But we'll let it sit a minute, see if we can get it to fire. I probably let the choke too long. Well, compression test is not looking good. So it's gone down since we started. So we had 40, 60, and 35. That is not enough compression to run. Now, I'd have to look back and see what it was previously, but I feel like we had one that was like 95, and we had 60 and 60, or I feel like we had maybe one that was above 100, but something has happened and we're dropping off. Like I said, we could have valves that are hanging up, sticking, not sealing off all the way, or we could have ring issues. I'm not really sure at this point. We do have a little bit of a puffing back through the intake, which could be valves, intake valves not sealing well. I can't really hear the exhaust to tell what we've got coming out the exhaust, but we could have some exhaust valves not sealing right. Really what we would need to do is we could do a leak down test on this thing and see where it's coming out, or like I've just done, we can dump some Marvel mystery oil in it and let that sit a few hours, and we'll crank it over, and then we'll see if that will help bring this engine back to life. All right, after letting the Marble Mist Oil sit, what I did is I bumped the starter over. After I put the Marble Mist Oil in there, I bumped the starter over a few times, not letting it spin fast because I didn't want to blow the Marble Mist Oil out, but I wanted that Marble Mist Oil to coat everything, and as the piston's going up, you know, the rings are wanting to do this, and so that helps, you know, as they're doing that, it helps get that Marble Mist Oil in around there than just sitting on top of the piston. You know, I wanted it all around the rings. So after doing all that, we're up to about 140 compression, 140 pounds of compression on each cylinder. I don't think it's going to stay that high. I think that's, you know, well, like I said, oil or anything like Marble Mist Oil, it helps seal the rings. And so worn rings, you put some oil around them, it'll help them seal, but that's just temporary. You know, as soon as it's fired, it's going to burn that oil off. So I don't know if it's going to stay running or not, or stay that high or not, or if it'll run. We're going to try to crank it, see if it'll start. Why did it quit? This is kind of what it did last time. Did we run out of compression? Maybe run out of fuel. Looks like we've got fuel. See if we'll crank back up. Carburetor. wires keep popping off. Read reviews on another brand of these plug wires that said that they popped off. Evidently these do as well. Probably the same ones, just sold by a different company. They're about to get a bad review. We definitely have fuel delivery issues. It's just not feeding enough fuel, and we're probably about out in our can here too. We are pretty much out of fuel, but it runs. We've got a few issues. We're gonna have to put a fuel pump in it. I put my finger over where they cut the fuel pump line off, and it is not sucking, so definitely have a bad fuel pump on it. So I think we need to fix that, and I think once we fix that, and we're gonna need to get a fuel pump, a fuel tank, and get all that working. Now that we know the tractor's working, I think what I'll do, I'm gonna go leave a bad review on these plug wires, but other than that, we may try to get another set of them. I think we need to probably do another compression test now that the engine's warmed up. We can see the real health of this engine. Why the compression was so low, I think what happened was that other carburetor was flooding it out so bad. I think it just washed the cylinders, and they were just dry, those rings were just dry trying to seal. And I think that's what our issue was. So much raw fuel was going through this thing, it washed any oil off of the cylinder walls, and the rings just were not sealing. I think that's what happened, and then the marble mist oil brought it back up. Because like I said, this thing, I did a compression test on it, and it wasn't great, but it was enough that it should have been firing. It was definitely not 60, 40, and 30, or whatever it was that we did on our last run, or next to last run. So I think I'll pull the plugs back out of it. I'm going to run another compression test. We know the engine runs now. I think it's just a matter of kind of fine-tuning it, but I would like to know kind of what kind of health it's in after getting it running and getting a little bit of heat into the engine. We should get a more accurate compression test. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'll let y'all know what it comes back as, but I think for now that's all we're going to do. Until I get a better fuel system on this thing, I'm not going to try to run it. Our tire that held air on the other tractor is now flat on this one. Go figure. So we can't really drive it right now anyway. So let me do the compression test. I'll let y'all know what it comes back as. But it runs now. We don't know if it'll drive yet. But like I said, we need to get the fuel system in a little better shape first. I may try to rig up a little bit better of a fuel system, and maybe we can run it for a little bit longer and get this tire to hold some air, and we can just check to make sure the transmission's good before I spend some more money on that. But this video, I've got hours of video trying to get this thing running, so this is definitely long enough for now that that will have to be in another video. So let me do the compression test, and I'll bring y'all back. All right, this is where we're going to leave off here. We've got 100, 100, and 95. So that's good enough to run. It's not great, but I would think at least this thing should have about 120. But it may come up a little more after running more. But these plug wires are definitely junk. I'm going to reach out to the seller. Once there's some heat in the engine, I mean, they come right off. There's nothing, the end of it that goes onto the plug doesn't snap onto it. It kind of fits loosely, and so the rubber part just doesn't hold it either once it's got some heat. So I'll reach out to them. Worst case scenario, what I could do is possibly put some new ends on it off a used set of plug wires. You know, a good wire end that snaps onto the plug. That would take care of these where they would work, but they're not like that. I should be able to get a refund for them and try to figure out which ones to buy from here. I guess see if I can find some OEM ones. But it's running. It was a lot of work to get it to this point, but yeah. So at least we've got a running tractor, and you know, it can only get better from here, I guess. The engine sounded good, didn't seem noisy or anything. Oil pressure light, of course, went out. So yeah, it seems to be a good engine. I took the radiator cap off, you know, checked. It's not bubbling up through the radiator or anything. Once it blew out that Marvel Mister Oil, it seemed to be running pretty clean. The plugs, although the threads look grummy from down in there, the plugs themselves look pretty good. Doesn't look too oily or anything, so I think it'll be decent. Should be a decent runner and make for a good tractor. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and subscribe for more. Let me know what the hardest one you got to run was. This is one of the harder ones that actually ran, you know, without any having to do any like internal engine work. So yeah, should have replaced that carburetor to begin with. I think that definitely caused our low compression. So if we would have started with a better carburetor, I think we would have gotten this thing running quicker. Of course, we still would have had that intake valve issue. Anyway, thanks.